What? Funny. So last week we looked a little bit about the first thing that we chant in the evening, the robe chant, which is at the top of page 1 in the chant book. So I thought tonight it would be interesting to look at the universal dedication, which is the most frequent thing that we chant. It's at the bottom of page 1. And for most people, it's the first thing that you end up memorizing. And we usually don't even tell you that it's there because everyone memorizes it. So if you didn't memorize it or didn't know where it was, you were at sea. We usually chant it in English, and tonight was a fun exception where we chanted this little chant in Sino-Japanese. And it's done at the end of pretty much every Zen ceremony and sometimes in the middle, sometimes too. In English, it's all Buddha's 10 directions 3 times. All honored ones, Bodhisattva, Mahasattvas, wisdom beyond wisdom, Maha Prajna Paramita. And then what we chanted tonight in Sino-Japanese, an early Japanese voicing of Chinese characters, which wouldn't be intelligible to a Japanese person either. Jiho san shi ishi fu shi son bu sa moko sa moko hoja horomi. And we never used to chant it in Japanese ever. And what inspired me was we were in Japan, group of us from the Sangha went year and a half ago, a couple years ago. And we got to stay at a temple. It was actually the temple of the Suzuki family, where Suzuki Roshi came from in the 50s and where his son and grandson are now, and their wives. And we did a little service there with the grandson, who's named Shungo. He's maybe about 50 years old now. And we this chant came up multiple times in the service because he did a little more elaborate service which has sections, and after each section you chant this little chant. And I was the only one that knew it, so I thought, well, that's silly. This is an easy thing to learn, so it'd be good if we all knew this. So you're ready when you go to Japan. At least there's one thing you'll be able to join in, and it feels really good. A little later, we were at another big temple, and we were being hosted by some Japanese monks, and they did chant with us the robe chant. And I remember Terrell, especially our friend Terrell, told us that shivers went up and down his spine, like, wow, it's real. Not just made up here. And it's entirely possible we could have diverged so much over the decades here that it would be unrecognizable, but actually it sounded pretty much the same. So this little chant at the end, it's an odd little chant. What is it trying to say? It doesn't, it's just kind of a list. It says something about Buddhas, and then it says something about bodhisattvas, and then it seems to sort of jump to a teaching, something about wisdom. It's nouns with some enthusiastic adjectives and no verbs at all. It doesn't say we vow or we intend or this is for or anything like that. So what's this about? Well, one clue is the context of it, that it's chanted at the end of a ceremony, and it's chanted right after the chant leader, who was Hana tonight, and the service sounded wonderful. You three, thank you all. And our chant leader chants something on her own, in which she makes some statements about dedicating merit, about sort of like sending the energy of our chanting and bowing to teachers and beings and bodhisattvas and stuff like that. And there it says that we dedicate the merit of this ceremony to we're thankful for this. It's all full sentences pretty much, and then this is tacked on to the end. And it's at the end of not just that, but a whole pile of offerings. First, on the community's behalf, the central priest offers incense, And already we had on the altar an offering of light. That's why there's a candle on there. That's an offering of light. And flowers, also an offering. And the incense offering is extra empowered by the priest wearing the special robe. Remember, we learned about that last week, wearing the okesa. In some sense, like the human is not that important. It's the okesa that does the offering. Okesa needs some hands and arms, so you have to put somebody in there. But and then after that, we all offer our whole bodies. That's what the prostration is. It's an offering of the body, giving the body. And then the chants, although they are actually tonight is a great example of all this because you couldn't even understand what we were chanting for the most part, you know. So it does all have meaning, and we usually chant most of that in English. Um, but the intention is not to remind ourselves of good teachings exactly. The intention of the chanting is also an offering. We're offering this chanting, offering these words of power and understanding and devotion. And so then the question comes up, who are we offering all this to? We do have some statues that seems to create a kind of focal point, some kind of Buddha and Bodhisattva statues. But all of it is to generate some kind of energy, which in Buddhism is called merit. And this is an interesting thing because it's one piece of Buddhism as a religion that's been a little harder to land in our culture because it kind of sounds almost like a little bit like a transaction or something. Like we're generating this stuff because we have the power to generate it, and then we're kind of bequeathing it, you know, and maybe we hope something nice will happen for us along the way. But this is a central part of Buddhism and always has been. When we first received Buddhism from Asia, and of course it had already been in America for 100 years, but when the sort of Eurocentric dominant Western culture received Buddhism from Asia, it was easy to relate to the meditation part because it seems like we might get something from that, right? Might get some calm or some peace, and then pretty soon we realize, well, we also help each other by doing it together. So there's some altruism there, but we're happy to have some calm and some peace. But all the chanting and ritual, maybe we might be a little suspicious of and a little curious about. And in fact, some people, when they first come to the Zen Center, really don't like it that much at all. And maybe you're one of them. I'm sorry if that's the case. And sometimes it's enough of a barrier that people say, yeah, I'll go on the other night when they don't do all that stuff, you know, which is legit. Tuesday and Thursday you can come. Less of that. But Buddhism really understands it as actually the most important thing. And the other little shocker that we relearned when we went to Japan is although we went to places where there was an emphasis in meditation for the most part, the vast majority of Zen temples in Japan, there is not meditation actually. There's chanting and bowing and rituals and lots of orientation also around the memorial services and funerals. And the priest who has been trained, you know, and the training always includes meditation. But the message they receive is meditation is a good thing, but your main job is this ritual. And you know, any priest running any temple, and often it's just one priest, you know, maybe they have one disciple or something like that, or someone in their family who helps them. What they will do for sure every morning is bowing and chanting. Like that's a lifetime commitment, and maybe some meditation before that. So this idea of spiritual energy, of merit, the Sanskrit for it is punya, and the Japanese is kudoku, which I've never really heard used, but it's just interesting to know the word kudoku. And the English word, as I mentioned, that was chosen to translate all this, we heard Hannah say this word, is merit. So we already have some challenges whenever we translate anything, because maybe merit means something else to us than what they intended, or at least to some extent. But merit is kind of like the underlying energy of the universe. The idea is that it's all pervasive, just that you can't see it or touch it doesn't mean it's not real. And in Western thought, we have a sort of rigid idea about what's real, right? Maybe a little less so in other cultures. And it's also the energy that kind of allows the function of karma, allows the function of cause and effect, and it's the energy that's really central in ethics too. That you don't do good actions to be a good person, you do good actions because it will naturally result in good things happening in the universe, and that actioning, that happening is through this merit floating around or flowing around. And beneficial actions generate positive merit, beneficial merit. And I've even seen negative energy called demerit, which sounds even more funny. You got to demerit. And of course, it's a little bit slippery because it doesn't always look that way in the short term. This whole idea of karma. That good actions lead to good fruits. Because who hasn't had the experience of thinking you just did something really good and something bad happened apparently as a result? But the one of the ways to look at that is that it's not just like a single action and a single result, two little things with a straight line between them. Everything's inputs into this vast web of causality. And there's a gazillion factors that you are unaware of, including stuff inside your own mind that you're unaware of, right? And all kinds of other things that are happening, right? We only know a tiny, teeny, weeny little slice of what seems to be happening. But we know this thinking is that it's all tapping into this network of energy. And that probably one of the most beneficial things we can do, maybe even more beneficial than tangible things that we would think of, ways of helping people, is to generate more positive merit, more positive energy. And in Buddhism, which was following after the Brahminical religions of India when the Buddha appeared, 5th century-ish before Common Era, religious practices are seen as like the superpower for generating merit, like really effective. Feeding children and building bridges and cleaning and all these things are also positive, but chanting a sutra is a whole another order of magnitude of goodness. So that's why it's so important. It's actually helping the world, very directly be a little saner, a little happier, a little more wholesome. It's not just like a little private religious rite that will make us feel more in harmony maybe because we're chanting together, which it does, but it's also this intention around energy. And maybe to us it would sound a little bit less weird if we didn't think that we were so separate, which is another core of Buddhist teaching, which is we're wrong about that. We're not so separate. We have this feeling of being a separate person, but the more you feel into this, I think the more you realize that this temporary experience you're having of this is me and this is what's happening with me is actually being co-created by everybody around you, right? We say, oh, I'm influenced by others. So that's how we think about it. But Buddhism says, yeah, no, that's not the whole story. You're not just influenced by others, we're being created by others, created by the universe every moment. And there's a kind of a sense of continuity, right? And the teaching suggests, well, it seems that way, but actually just a similar, and the next version of you just got regenerated on the next moment. So in that universe, that way of looking at this universe, where things are much more fluid, radically impermanent and temporary, then how could there be anything but energy floating around? Like there's these apparent forms, but the forms, if we really understand how insubstantial they are, right? how brief they are, just little flashes of light. A wonderful classic metaphor about all this distinction between separateness and interconnection or interbeing. A wonderful metaphor there is waves on the ocean. And the idea is that when we think we're separate, we're like the wave, and we're a little wave moving along, looking around, saying hi to the other waves, and kind of terrified of hitting the beach, right? Because then we're gone. But we're the ocean the whole time, We're the ocean the whole time. And so this merit, this punyas, is also like the water of the ocean. And so we're improving and cleaning up and purifying the water with our rituals. So I think in that frame, it seems less strange to me. In the frame of separate, mind and body and separateness, it's a little bit sounds a little woo woo, but maybe everything is radically woo woo, and it's just a description of how it is. And that's the other thing about understanding this and understanding our that ethics is you start to realize that everything we do really matters because we're constantly interacting with this vast network of energy. Even the way what we think about. They say that the actions of body, speech, and mind all generate karma, all create this energy. Whereas in the Western thought, we think that our brains are private. So there's no privacy anymore either. Sorry. And that makes sense, right? We know that the way we think leaks out one way or the other, right? So this is just taking that up a notch. Like, well, it's not just that it leaks out, it's that you're influencing the universe by what thoughts you hold. You're co-creating the world. So this little verse at the end seems to be a kind of a coda, kind of a punctuation mark at the end of our rituals, and a way for the whole Sangha to add their voices to the dedication of merit, to what we're giving this merit to. And it's actually a list of 3 things. So the 3 things are, and the lines that point to them. First, it says all Buddha's 10 directions. So this is the Buddha. There's the historical idea of the Buddha. But even early Buddhism, which had a more historical idea of the Buddha, even there he wasn't just like some guy who was really good at meditation. That was a kind of Western cleanup job to make it less a religion. To say, oh, well, he was an ordinary person who just was really good at practice. And even in the early Buddhist teachings, the person who became the Buddha of our age, Shakyamuni Buddha, he had to practice really hard and make major sacrifices for multiple lifetimes, like hundreds of lifetimes. So it wasn't just like good job with your meditation kind of thing. But then later Buddhism, but in that earlier system, there was still just one Buddha in the world at a time. And Buddhas arise and Buddhas decline. In later Buddhism, they thought that's a little too narrow, a little too limited. So in the later Mahayana Buddhism, of which we're a part, it got a lot more cosmic. And there's kind of like Buddhas everywhere. Buddhas floating around, Buddhas on flower petals, Buddhas in other worlds who can come visit this world if they get called properly. So that's why it says all Buddhas. And 10 directions means every direction. North, south, east, west, up, down, northeast, all those. And 3 times means past, present, and future. And the idea there is not that I'm remembering the Buddhas of the past and I'm looking forward to the Buddhas of the future. It's that the Buddhas of past, present, and future are all right here. And we're offering this energy, we're offering this merit to all the Buddhas in every direction and every time. So first we have Buddha. And then it says, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas. So bodhisattvas, these are Sanskrit terms. Bodhi means a being, or Bodhi means awakening, sorry, and Sattva means a being. So these are awakening beings, which has like kind of a triple meaning at least. Beings who are in the process of awakening, always. Beings who are devoted to the awakening of others, and those two together, awakening, awakening beings. And Maha means great, so Sattvas is great beings. So it's awakening beings, great beings. And usually when they're talking about Mahasattvas, they're talking about the sort of principal, sort of named bodhisattvas, of which there are, I don't know, somewhere between 30 and 40, depending on the system. Bodhisattvas of compassion and bodhisattvas of wisdom are the ones we think of the most, and those were also mentioned in the dedication that Hana proclaimed. And we have a wonderful statue, pretty new to us, out in Cloud Hall if you haven't seen it yet. It's a Chinese version of the Bodhisattva of compassion, called in Chinese Guan Yin. So these are the Mahasattva Bodhisattvas. But Bodhisattvas also means all of us. It means all beings, and you know, in their quirky ways, you know, and most of them wouldn't use this language, but that's okay, right? All beings are trying to awaken. All beings want to be happy and don't want to suffer. All beings want to take care of each other and help their children. And we can think of plenty of examples of beings that seem to do that in a ridiculously distorted way, but nonetheless, right, that's our understanding. These beings are trying to awaken in their own way. There's also some deep teachings about greed, hate, and delusion, but we'll save that for another day. I think that might come in a couple weeks. Yeah, yeah. So this is the Sangha, right? The Sangha writ large. So we had Buddha, and we had Sangha. We had the community, the Bodhisattvas. And then it jumps to wisdom beyond wisdom, Maha Prajna Paramita. Suddenly now we're talking about what seems to be a teaching. And what's meant here is really respecting and paying homage to not just a particular teaching, but a way of understanding, right? Understanding the universe in the light of this radical, interpenetrated impermanence beyond anything that we can quite understand with our big brains. So wisdom beyond wisdom is just an English translation of Prajna Paramita, and there's Maha again, right? Great. So great Prajna Paramita. So wisdom not like a bunch of information you know, but wisdom like a deep understanding, a radical openness, an allowing of everything to actually be its interpenetrated, flowing, impermanently, constantly reappearing state. And that's the universe in which all this makes sense, right? So this actually makes a lot of sense that we would then go to the Dharma in that way. So our little verse does have the three treasures. They're not in the usual order. Buddha, Sangha, and then Dharma. And all this is to remind us of a couple of things. The teachings of not self, which I've been alluding to, that there's something much bigger going on here than any idea I could have of me or you or us or anything, right? And this is also reminding us of how important our choices are. What are we adding to these fields of energy, you know? Are we adding our good hearts in chanting and bowing? Are we adding kindness? Are we adding narrow-mindedness? Are we adding reactivity, you know? And all of that's always present in the room, right? Because we're humans, you know? But we can think about that when you feel a little judgmental of the way your neighbor's chanting or something, like, oh, shoot, I'm spiking the offering, you know? It's bad. Mellow out, you know? Because it really matters, even just to think that, you know? Yeah. Our collective offering gets a little bit, you know. So, if you look very literally at the Chinese, it's even briefer. Sorry, I'm struggling a little bit because I forgot my readers. Oh, you have some? Oh, that's handy. Somewhere I have this. I was just kind of letting my notes remind me what I want to say. Thank you so much. So, all this stuff comes to us from all the canonical texts. Oh, wow. Written down in Chinese, actually. Chinese pronounced in an unusual way, as I mentioned, by the Japanese monks. And let me find it here. The literal translation of the underlying Chinese would goes like this. Okay, yeah, here we go. I found it. 10 directions, 3 times, all Buddhas, Venerable Bodhisattva Mahasattvas, Maha Prajnaparamita. So that's pretty close to what we say. We have a little bit of mirroring between the English and the Sanskrit. You know, instead of just Maha Prajnaparamita, we have wisdom beyond wisdom, Maha Prajnaparamita. But it does have this problem, right? It doesn't really explain itself, you know. And when you're translating and bringing something in a new culture, you have to figure out, like, well, how much should we kind of like improve it, you know, so it makes sense to us. And this one, the way we do it is pretty literal. One of my sources for this talk is a little book, which I meant to bring, I forgot, by Kazuaki Tanahashi, known as Kaz. And he shares that in his translation that he did with Roshi Joan Halifax for the Upaya Zen Center in New Mexico, which some of us have been to. It's kind of an important Zen center in the American scene. They went with like let's have this make sense. Let's have this make sense to us. So they translated it as all awakened ones throughout space and time, honored ones, great beings who help us to awaken. Together we realize wisdom beyond wisdom! Exclamation mark. Isn't that interesting? Quite different, you know, but the same ideas. All awakened ones throughout space and time, honored ones, great beings who help all to awaken. Together we realize wisdom beyond wisdom. So that's much more loose translation. And, you know, the Chinese characters for realize are together, help, none of those are there. Right? Those are all additions so that it makes sense. So it's always a question, you know, how much do we tweak it and how much do we just have something a little mysterious and then once a decade or so we'll give a Dharma talk and explain it again, you know. And if you miss that talk, you'll never know, you know. And I feel pretty good about the choices that we've inherited, you know, that pretty true to the original, but a little bit more English, you know, so it makes a little sense and it makes sense once you learn about it. So that's what we're doing, you know, when we add that little chant at the end. We're reminding ourselves and each other of the fluidity, and the spaciousness and freedom of our true nature. And that we're all part of this ocean of energy. At this moment, as we chant, we're waves dancing, you know, but we're going to drop right back into the ocean any second. But since we get to be waves, we get to manifest something, right? We get to choose what comes out of our mouths. And so we choose joyfully this offering, you know, this strengthening of generosity and giving and wisdom. So we might think of this closing part of the very end of our merit making as a kind of like, I let go of myself as I give away this merit. And the wisdom beyond wisdom part reminds us that there's no one here to make merit and no one to hold on to merit and no merit to give away. That's why we can give away the merit. It's that sense of freedom, you know, sense of freedom. So it's not just like, hey guys, here you go. It's like wisdom beyond wisdom. Maha Prajna Paramita. So that's what I wanted to say tonight. Interesting, all these little gems embedded in the thing, huh? Do you have any questions or thoughts or additions? Can you guys hear online through the room mic, or do we need to? Okay, cool.
The word merit.
Yeah.
So, since he had such a deep meditation practice, he might want to sew a rakusu. And he said, "Well, I don't need a merit badge."
Yeah.
So I kind of carry that idea of merit as something that you have attained, and we're
Yeah.
cautioned about attainment. And
Right.
so you brought a different meaning to the word.
Yeah, it's not something we can attain. Yeah. Yeah, it's something that's emergent, like so it's like a more processed than thing. Yeah. 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 Yeah, yeah, in our hearts. Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Anna. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, that's one of the ways that merit is problematic for us. Yeah, getting a merit badge. Yeah. Yeah, and sure there's some Boy Scouts in the room, nothing wrong with that, but Girl Scouts, that's a virtuous activity. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. I mean, and the merit thing. I mean, it's in other. It's all over the place though too, right? We talk about good vibes and energy, and the Indians talk about prana, and the East Asian traditions talk about chi. So there's lots of energy stuff going on. And if you've ever done if you ever participate in any of the healing modalities that use energy, which science cannot understand or describe, and you feel something, it's like, well, there's something here. You gonna say something, Chris? Yeah, yeah. It's a beyond. Yeah, yeah.
Tim, we can't hear what's happening in the
Yeah, I'm
room.
gonna repeat, Chris. I'm gonna repeat it. Hold on a sec.
Okay.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah. So Chris Burkhardt is saying, it just points to kind of the vastness of what we're doing when we do this chanting ritual stuff. It's like reminding ourselves like this is beyond anything. It's beyond our thought. It's past, present. It's beyond time. It's beyond space. Is that a pretty good summary? Just like it's a pointing to the beyondness of the whole thing. So yeah, we have to be disciplined about passing microphones around, or I'll just repeat. It's fine either way. Are you feeling uplifted and beyond? I hope so. I hope so. Yeah. Okay. A little more so. Okay. So anyway, and the other thing that's interesting too is like you don't have to believe anything, right? Because a belief would be kind of a rigid thing in your brain anyway, right? So it's better if you don't believe any of this. Just do it. Just do it. And a more traditional thing in the Zen world is you never explain any of this anyway, right? You just like just follow along. You'll figure it out. Okay, well, I mean that's good for now, huh? Thank you so much for listening, and I'm on a roll, and then I got some Confederates lined up here too if I'm out of town. But I think we'll kind of keep going a deep dive through the Sutra book.